There are many different authorities on Terra, but none are more historic, important, and tragic as the Lord of Fiends. The Lord of Fiends is the highest authority among the Sarkaz races, leading their people both politically and spiritually. The best way to think of this position is as a High King, someone who other rulers and kings of their kind must answer to. The title is not hereditary, but appointed. Any individual may become the next Lord of Fiends upon the death of the previous one. They could be pure-blooded Sarkaz nobles, mixed-blooded Sarkaz, warriors, scholars, and even non-Sarkaz. And the symbol of the Lord of Fiends is the Black Crown, or Civilite Eterna, a relic made by the predecessors to record their history. The crown possesses many abilities, but the most prevalent among them is the ability known as empathy, which allows the wielder to experience the emotions and memories of others around them. Furthermore, the memories of previous wielders of the crown are also stored within, which not only provides knowledge to the crown bearer, but also the emotions and feelings associated with them, often resulting in the bearers becoming overwhelmed if their will and sense of self isn't strong enough. Now we shall go through the archives of each known Lord of Fiends, from the famous to the tragic. Keep in mind, as we go through them, that the timeline is often speculative, or some have barely more than a single sentence of information. Let's start with the very first. Around 10,000 years ago, the Tikaz were still primitive hunters and gatherers, who often resort to cannibalism to survive. One particular Tikaz was shunned and later exiled by his tribe for not wanting to hunt and feed upon his fellows. His exile would take him to the Silver Mountains. There, he would find the first Originium, Ananam, as well as an ancient and alien artifact that they would call the Black Crown. Surviving underground, under the mountain, he would be the first to go through a forced evolution, and an ascension into the humanoid Tikaz, and later Sarkaz we would see today, or so the legend says. He would return to his tribe, showing them these newfound gifts of knowledge and power. He brought about the invention of witchcraft, which is based on sparse records we have today, was achieved through the merging of Tikaz subrace biological abilities with the early version of Originiumars. With his return, he was given the name of Farchaser. Using these newfound gifts, he and his tribe would start the first Tikaz Empire and build the first city of Kazdel. From that landmark, he would rule for several thousand years. Then they came. The aliens. The invaders. The ancients and elders would arrive, and the ancient wars began. The war historically wouldn't go in the Tikaz favor, and in a final act of desperation, Farchaser would use the first Originium to summon the first ever catastrophe on Terra. Legend says that he died alongside his enemies and loyal men, and the Black Crown went missing for the next 2,000 years. In that time, the derogatory term Sarkaz would end up being adopted as the official name of the species, while the ancients and elders gained a larger foothold on Terra. Farchaser would be known as the only true king of the Tikaz, and as the first Lord of Fiends, began a cycle that would span for the next multiple millennia. Gul'dul was a gargoyle, one of the most ancient Sarkaz subraces. His ancestors built the archstone gardens of the first Kazdel, and even protected Farchaser's throne room via a spell that prevented the elders from reaching it during the ancient wars. Before becoming the second Lord of Fiends, he had dreams of building the most impenetrable fortress, and Gul'dul would be raised to become the next leader of his clan. However, his home and clan were attacked by an army of elder aggressors. Just before he would meet his end, he would be saved by individuals that he would call brothers, and both future Lord of Fiends, Balosaka and Quillon. Gul'dul and the other surviving gargoyle Sarkaz would be welcomed into Balosaka's clan, the Gul'dul clan. They would search and lead the Sarkaz to a new spot in an unexplored region that they called Sorrow's Ground, where they would build a small settlement that later flourished into the second Kazdel city. Here, Gul'dul would somehow find the Black Crown, marking him as the second Lord of Fiends. He stood at Kazdel's highest point and turned to stone. The elder hegemons retreated upon witnessing his Black Crown, while the Sarkaz rejoiced. Gul'dul's silence. The new kingdom grew over time, and the issues stirred. Gargoyles are generally pacifists, while the Diablo were more warmongering. Gul'dul and Balosaka would butt heads and disagree on laws and policies. This would come to a stress point when Balosaka exposed a Capranate living in their cities, whom he charged with espionage and proceeded to execute once he concluded that Gul'dul wouldn't make that decision himself. Following this event, Gul'dul would make attempts to avoid war, a decision that enraged Balosaka, resulting in him killing Gul'dul, cutting off his arms, and drowning him before claiming the crown. This would mark the first curse of the crown: death, murder, betrayal, and tragedy. Balosaka, a Diablo Sarkaz caster, who became chieftain of the Gul'dul clan soon after Gul'dul's rise. He had a strong hatred towards the ancients and elders, sharing his father's point of view on waging war against the hegemons, albeit in an even more radical way. At some point, Balosaka and his close friend and bodyguard, Quillon, would save the gargoyle Gul'dul and his surviving clan. A familiar event would play out. Gul'dul became the Lord of Fiends, and Balosaka became his general. And over the years, disagreements between Balosaka and Gul'dul would begin to grow. In his mind, Balosaka cultivated envy. Why wasn't he chosen by the crown? He and his clan, who have been fighting against the invaders for thousands of years. When the Capranate spies were found, and Gul'dul refused to start war, Balosaka hit his boiling point. Gathering his clan to launch a coup, Balosaka would murder one of his closest friends and seize the crown for himself. It's unknown how long his reign lasted, but soon after taking the throne, he started conquests and raids on the ancients and elders to take back what was theirs, which only worsened the world's perception of the Sarkaz, though that also likely freed many Sarkaz from elder oppressions. Lava obediently followed Balosaka's army and spread across the land. They cared not for the elder hegemons, nor their fellow Sarkaz. This land belongs to the Diablo, and there is no need for others. As their king, Balosaka absolutely cannot allow the crown to fall on the head of another. Balosaka's arrogance. At some point in his reign, he decided to launch an expedition into the ruins of the first Kazdel, in now what is called the Bleached Wasteland, an attempt in restoring his people's tarnished glory. Quillon, enraged by Balosaka's actions, betrayed his own friend to take the crown for himself. Quillon's sword would be shattered in their duel, before the broken blade would puncture Balosaka's throat. With his dying breath, he would use the crown to utter a curse upon its future bearers, to always be betrayed in their final moments. The Kodaimanor clan would be exiled, having vanished ever since. Quillon is probably the most famous Lord of Fiends in the history of Terra. He has many titles: the Errant Overlord, the Errant Sovereign, the Enlightened Despot, the First Oni. Quillon was the first mixed-blood Sarkaz to become a Lord of Fiends. He possessed a unique blue-coloured flames, as well as being possibly the strongest swordsman in Terra's history. He rarely had to use his arts in combat, relying mostly on his unmatched swordsmanship skills with his legendary blade. Quillon was born to an unknown clan of Sarkaz exiles, after they were attacked by ancients and elders. He was brought into the Condemnor clan, where the young Quillon would admire the heroes and stories of the ancient wars, even from the elders themselves. He befriended Balosaka and became his bodyguard to protect the Diablo from his own overconfidence. You already know how this story goes. Quillon, Balosaka, and the clan would save Gul'dul and the surviving gargoyles. The three would become best friends, and even brothers, with Quillon being the youngest of the three. When Gul'dul became the second Lord of Fiends, Quillon was thrilled that one of his best friends became the hero of legends, offering himself as messenger and swordbearer. During Gul'dul's reign, Quillon's name would spread as a famous adventurer and royal messenger, until one day he received a missive to return to Kazdel. He would return to see Kazdel ablaze, and raided by the Kodaimanor clan, the very clan he lived with and saw as family. His king and close friend Gul'dul was dead, while Balosaka and those loyal to him were busy with conquest. Quillon would survive multiple ambushes and save many Sarkaz lives, eventually trusting the gargoyles who survived to look after the city, while he hunted down his friend. After a long journey, following Balosaka's fiery path, Quillon would confront his old friend and challenge him. Quillon's blade would be shattered, and Balosaka would be stabbed by the broken blade. But not before Balosaka would use the crown to utter a curse upon those that wear the crown to always be betrayed. The battle was over when Quillon raised Balosaka's head for all to see, and they would kneel before him, not because of his victory, but because the crown had chosen him. After the battle, he would allow the remaining members of the Kodaimanor clan to retrieve Balosaka's body, before exiling them to roam the wastes. He would pardon other tribes of Sarkaz subraces, and create an additional authority to help govern, the Sarkaz royal courts, where the kings and queens of each subrace would take their place. He would teach the courts to judge and rule. Here, Quillon the Errant Sovereign would become the fourth Lord of Fiends. Quillon would rule for around 300 years, 3 centuries of peace. Over time, the invaders that his former brother-in-arms, Balosaka, drove away, would slowly return. Rather than fighting these alien races, Quillon would sort another plan, looking towards the east of Terra. He would start a journey with his loyal followers and coexist with the elders and ancients who had begun anew. Here ends the certainty of Quillon, and the beginning of his many tales. Some say he fell to wrath, others say he transcended through enlightenment. The descendants of his followers would become known as the Oni and the Anasa, the rage and the enlightenment of Quillon. Further stories say he was never able to reach enlightenment truly, unable to control his flames or wield his sword again, and that he even killed his own kind. But let me tell you the truth of his death, dear viewer. It was betrayal. Betrayal by those that welcomed them. A large Sarkaz population was murdered, including his wife. This was more than enough for him to give in to his wrath. He slaughtered the cowards, the murderers, and avenged his people. And there, he finally met his final death. One final stand. To this day, Quillon remains one of the most influential Lord of Fiends, where he is even talked and written about in other cultures of distant lands. After the first 4 crown bearers, history becomes muddled. We do not know the exact order or number of the most later lords. Many archives and records encapsulating their achievements have been lost to the ages. But this is what we do know. Before his title of Lord of Fiends, Danzo was the leader of the vampire Sarkaz court, and eldest brother to Draknus. After taking up the crown, he led and commanded his brother along with an army of Sarkaz to stop or destroy the Firewatch, we now know as the Lifeboat, from getting into Khazdel territory and causing havoc. The battle was ultimately won at the hands of the Sarkaz. Danzo would become well respected by the majority of the Sarkaz subraces, even the Goliath and remaining Diablo Sarkaz. He would take a more passive approach in guiding and protecting Khazdel. Yet again, Balosaka's curse of the crown arose. Danzo would be betrayed by his own blood. Draknus wasn't happy with this passive Khazdel and began a coup, before piercing his brother's chest, bringing an end to Danzo's life. Draknus did not pick up the crown, however, and after Danzo, there were 2 more Lord of Fiends that we have very, very little information on. Their titles, the Wandering Vagrant and the Lumberjack, being the only records we can verify. From the 8th to the 11th Lords, we only have small snippets, often summarized only with a single sentence or 2. A Banshee who became the Lord of Fiends at some point. She wanted to control the royal court's fate, but that ultimately led to her demise. A Naxxira Sarkaz, known for his mercy and kindness. However, due to his size and appetite, he was in constant hunger that eventually led to an early death. She was at the time the leader of the Cyclops Sarkaz and a very wise Lord of Fiends. She was assassinated by unknown culprits, and her death would result in many Cyclops Sarkaz to migrate to Sami. A Damatzi fragment who somehow became the Lord of Fiends, though their legitimacy is questioned even to this day. The only past Lord of Fiends living to this day. His name is Kisartustai, though he's a shell of his former self. Potentially a Lord of Fiends that came from outside the royal courts, though it's unclear if this meant he was another Sarkaz subrace not belonging to the royal courts, or that he was a mixed blood. He was a master of arts, and a wielder of a unique arts that would allow him to weave time and the sunlight like threads, to sustain and grant his loyal forces near immortality. He brought many victories to Khazdel, such as the time he once annihilated a Pegasus army and smeared their golden blood all over the walls of his homeland. He was widely considered a hero, and brought a great age to Khazdel, but dark desires began to boil, greed and selfishness, a fear of loss of power, and a fear of death. To keep his power, he did the unthinkable, using the arts and rituals to possess the minds of his own offspring and lineage for generations, making other living bodies to possess or use under his control whenever he failed to bear a suitable offspring. His goal is always trying to reclaim that crown, vying for its power. Currently, he inhabits a body of his own lineage, the brother to Shaine. During the modern era, he would act as General Ferris's right hand, and once again made an attempt to reclaim the crown. He was stopped by Noel, Liz, and his own daughter, Shaine. However, he escaped, and now hides to plan his next plot. And for those curious, yes, Shaine, the Whitehorn Sarkaz medic and swordsman, is the only known individual who is a known living descendant of a Lord of Fiends. Elish was once a caster and carpenter who wanted to do good and had many great ideas to improve Kazdal's livelihood. He wanted Kazdal to step into a new age, announcing plans to transition the city to a nomadic platform and convincing the Revenant Sarkaz to serve as fuel for the Soul Furnace. But when he was crowned, his plans hardly went anywhere. He never made anything great during his time as Lord of Fiends. Not moving, rarely talking, despite being able to control the crown's power. He seemed desperate to save Kazdal, but the royal courts of this time used Elish to their advantage, often making jabs at him for not being a suitable ruler. Elish was a harmless ruler and never held any hostility to other nations, but he knew that war was brewing in the horizon and soon to engulf Kazdal for one goal in mind: the crown itself. In the year 898, Khauset invaded Kazdal with a joint alliance between Victoria, Lefania and Gul, armed with all sorts of technological marvels brought by the Crystal Age. The invaders crushed Kazdal like paper, and Elish was sent by the royal courts to fight in the front lines, only to be beheaded by Khauset herself. With his death, 6 heroes of Kazdal would arise, one of which would become the next Lord of Fiends. One who is likely most well known to you, dear viewers. Many know the tale of Teresa, but let's go over it again. Teresa and her twin brother Firchaser were mixed blood Sarkaz, who were born in Kazdal. Teresa would become a tailor, and her brother a warrior. Gentle and kind, but a talented caster, the two would even be mentored by Nezalem, the king of the Naxira. Their work would catch the eyes of the rest of the royal courts, Teresa becoming a royal tailoress, and Firchaser becoming a general and bodyguard of Elish, the previous Lord of Fiends. The two, in fact, would become more popular than the Puppet King himself. During the war in 898, many Sarkaz attempted to stand up and rally their people. Only Teresa and Firchaser managed to truly reorganize these standing forces and launch a counter-attack. Thanks to their commanding skills and coordination, they turned Kazdal into a death trap for the invaders, and Firchaser would kill Khauset, effectively removing the strategic head of the invaders. They would later be known as 2 of the 6 heroes who saved Kazdal. At the end of the war, Teresa and Firchaser would find the Black Crown on the battlefield. It is important to note that the crown originally chose the both of them together. However, Firchaser believed his sister was the better option to bear the crown, stepping down and letting her take the title as the next Lord of Fiends, and the first confirmed mixed blood Sarkaz to have the crown since the rule of Quillon. Together, they would form the Kazdal War Council, improve Kazdal's education, lifestyles and healthcare, leading to the formation of Babel, trying to create partnerships with other nations and factions for a future of peace. Also, during this time, Teresa would learn the truth of the crown from a resurrected Khauset, and the two would form a friendship. She would learn to become the first Lord of Fiends to master the precursor code of the crown, and later reverse Originium to recreate life from the assimilated universe. Her newfound peace would last for 200 years. Times would change as her brother started to lose faith in Babel and his sister's ideals, eventually leading to tensions. In 1086, Teresa and Babel were exiled, and a young Amya was found by the doctor. All of those years ago, that curse of betrayal from Balosaka would bear true. Teresa was betrayed by two that she considered close allies, her brother and you. Firchaser would begin a civil war between Babel and Gul'dul that would span multiple years. At its climax, while Babel's forces were retaking Gul'dul, the Doctor would shut down the Babel's landship's defenses, allowing Firchaser's assassins to enter. Amya would be with Teresa when the battle unfolded. Teresa, victorious, yet mortally injured, would pass the crown to Amya to break the cycle of cursed betrayal and keep the crown safe. She spent her final moments talking to you, the Doctor, wiping away your memories as an act of revenge, but also in an attempt to provide an opportunity for you to become a better person by removing the chains of your past. She would die soon after. Teresa's time was not over, however. She would be revived by the Confessari by severing her connection from the Myriad Souls, despite the initial opposition from Firchaser, who initially wasn't happy with such a blasphemous plan. He eventually seeing the opportunity to enact a grander vision that the two siblings once had. Teresa would find a way to the assimilated universe and finally free the Sarkas from the endless cycle of hate and despair by rewriting the rules of Originium, much like Farchaser before her, breaking the Myriad Souls. She would face her successor Amya, the Doctor, Calcit and Weasadel in a final battle. Here, in the assimilated universe, Teresa became a god with the knowledge of both the Crown and Originium. Despite this, she was defeated, ready to allow the next generation to take control, entrusting the future to those she holds dear. Our first Lord of Fiends of Outer Blood, a non-Sarkas and supreme leader of Rhodes Island. Though many people on Terra are unaware of what burden this young lord has. Before all of this, she was caught in an incident in Rebellion, becoming infected, but rescued by the Doctor. She would be brought to Babel and taken care of, being treated like a little sister or daughter by many. Unfortunately, she was present during the final moments of Teresa, becoming the next Lord of Fiends with her death. Over time, Amya became a great leader in her own right, helping find cures and making lives better for the infected, battling ageless manipulators and coming to bear her burden as Lord of Fiends, getting recognition from some of the greatest Sarkas, eventually becoming the successor her predecessor wished for. Now, she is preparing battle against an entity that wishes to encase her world in an endless prison. Hello and thank you for staying through this Terrastorian special. We really hoped you enjoyed this video. The Lord of Fiends is a very interesting lore topic that we wanted to share. A massive thank you to our artists, Heyker, Lonk and Alk, that helped put great work into helping represent each Lord of Fiends. A big thank you to Tama for editing this all together, and the animation team for doing the Sarkas alphabet and the title crown animation. Thank you to our research team for gathering the research notes, and Draknus for helping out with the scripts. Overall, a massive thank you to everyone on the team, and thank you to you, all of you watching and supporting Terrastorian.